everyone, welcome back to the ZachGP channel, and in today's episode I will be bringing you my F1 Fantasy Final 4. So as we know in F1 Fantasy, the deadline, especially for a sprint race weekend, is actually on the sprint, so we get to see practice 1 and the sprint quali before we get to make the decisions on our teams. So this video is here to help you with your F1 Fantasy teams and strategies before making our decisions. Now, as per usual, as you can see on my left, here is every single driver and constructors on the A tier and B tier sides needed points to go up in budget. And just a reminder, that's the A tier drivers and constructors can go down minus 0.3 to up 0.3, and the B tier drivers can go down minus 0.6 to up 0.6. So with that said and done, let's get into some hard and fast information. And if you like what you see, make sure to like and subscribe. First of all, I need to give you the ZachGP list of drivers and constructors to use and not to use in F1 Fantasy. So the gist of it is, if I do not say their name or the constructor's name, that means you do not bring them into your team. So coming into the A tier drivers, we have Oscar Piastri as the big dog. Oscar Piastri, he's been consistently beating Lando Norris even when he doesn't get the result over Lando Norris purely because of fastest lap points or more overtakes. These things can happen in F1 Fantasy to boost him in the points. So I would say Oscar Piastri, he's dirt cheap considering all the A tier drivers around him, and he's consistently getting you those big points. So for me, he still definitely is the one that everyone needs to keep on their radar, especially as realistically, he's the only one who's a surefire, unless he DNFs, hit for that 0.3 million increase. And that's about it. Of course, final fix wise, because then you don't have to worry about the budget, you can bring in the likes of Norris, Verstappen, potentially even Leclerc. But all of these situations are so, well, situational, where it's only really going to be used if we get to the actual qualifying and someone like a Verstappen qualifies really low, or the same for Norris, or if they qualify on pole and Piastri's like 4th or 5th and we don't think he's going to win the race. Then heading into the A tier constructors, and we have the likes of McLaren, who definitely are the big dog. They are always the big dog coming into a weekend of racing, so you have to have them on your team. And then it's also Ferrari for that safe budget. Where they are with the budget and the points, I just don't think there's a reason to go to Mercedes or Red Bull over anyone like Ferrari. And this is a really big call from me, because basically that means if you can afford the Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Mercedes teams, I do think it is a no-go even at this race. Purely because most people would need a minus 10 to get there. Mercedes budget-wise just look dreadful. It could damage your budget beyond repair if you go to this, and Mercedes don't even look any better than Ferrari right now. So realistically, my plan is to wait out till I can use Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari, which hopefully will be around Hungary, Zandvoort time. So for now, Mercedes, they just don't look worth it. And Red Bull, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Yuki Tsunoda really needs to pull up his socks before I look anywhere near there. Then heading into the B tier drivers, and there is one name that realistically has to be on everyone's team no matter what, and that is Nico Hülkenberg, as he needs minus 34 to go up 0.6 million in budget. Plus, he's been in absolute brilliant form in that Sauber so far this season. Then you also have Ollie Behrman, who's another great option that need negative points to go up 0.6 million in budget. So those two I expect to see in everyone's teams. Then you have the likes of Lance Stroll, who looks brilliant as well, but at 8.5 million, he's expensive. So it's more of a case of, if you can't afford to bring him in, it's not the end of the world, but if you can, I would highly recommend it. And then the final few B tier drivers you can use are the likes of Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, as they all look like they can hit their points threshold, get to that 0.6 million. And then you also have the different strategy of they won't go up in value, but if you're really struggling on budget for your team and you have to bring in these sorts of drivers, Colapinto and Liam Lawson are at the price floor at 4.5 million. So no matter what happens to them, they physically can't go down in budget, making them brilliant assets to hold. Then B tier constructor wise, again, realistically, unless you're going for a different strategy, potentially an extra DRS, I don't recommend bringing any of them in, because for teams such as Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Sauber to work, you have to rely on, first of all, it being an absolutely chaotic race, which averagely just doesn't work out. And you'd also realistically need Lando Norris, or whoever your second A tier driver to be. He has to score 35 to 40 plus points in a weekend, which is just too much of a risk considering the Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari builds are just as strong, for me even stronger, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But if you do go for the B tier constructors, you have the likes of Sauber, Haas, and Aston Martin as the 3 you would go for. Realistically, my favorite is Sauber, as they are the cheapest, need the least amount in budget to go up. And again, with Hulkenberg, Bortoletto did slow him down a little bit in Silverstone, but Hulkenberg with Sauber, brilliant form, brilliant B tier constructor. Now, heading into the chips selections for this video, this is where it gets a little bit interesting, and here is the ZachGP strategy for all of you out there. So, straight away, if it is showing more than 50% coverage of rain, both Sunday and the sprint race / qualifying, then no negative is 100% a lock. Now, you can risk it for the chocolate biscuit and go for it even when it's around 30 to 50%, because that's what around Silverstone was, but realistically, it needs to be a surefire chance of rain for anyone to use no negative. So keep an eye on that, because that will be developing as these videos are coming out. And realistically, you should not be using no negative, if you do, until the final 30 minutes of the deadline and then selecting it, because you need to make sure you have the exact up-to-date stats for this. So if it does look good coming into that final hour for the sprint deadline, then go no negative. And then quickly, before I go on to the rest of the big chips, going a little bit off the no negative vibe, if no negative has already been used in your team, then the next best bet on a rainy race like this, where we can have someone like a Hulkenberg scoring more points than a Piastri or Norris, Piastri or Norris potentially DNFing, all of these situations, then you use autopilots. So it goes no negative if you can use it, if you've still got it, then to autopilot, and then that little small chance if it's not raining, then you go to the other chips that I'll talk about now. However, if that doesn't look like it's going to happen, the next best chip would probably be Limitless if you still have it, because you need to start using Limitless. And again, if there's no rain on the forecast, Spa and Hungary actually had the same amount of overtakes last season in their races, so there's not much difference between going for Hungary over Spa. And Spa, obviously, there's more potential points from the sprint race, and we actually get to see, like I mentioned, the sprint quali results, meaning we sort of get to see a little bit into the future of how everything looks, whereas in Hungary, you have to take that punt and hope for the best. You know exactly which team to go for. For me, at the minute, the best Limitless team looks like Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari. Now, you could have Hamilton instead of Russell. However, I like having a little bit of a mix when it comes to Ferrari and Mercedes, because Mercedes and Ferrari tend to be closer than it looks on the F1 Fantasy points. You know how great he can be, especially this season. Then finally, chip-wise, for now, you also have the extra DRS. Now, I know a lot of people want to use extra DRS with the likes of Norris, Piastri realistically 3 times, Norris 2 times, McLaren and Sauber. However, you just look at where you are and your team budget for now, because the reason I do not like it for Spa is you can get more points out of it in the later season in Kota, Brazil, or potentially even Qatar as your final chip ever used in F1 Fantasy 25. And the reason for this is, averagely, most people are going to be using Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari teams. Those Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari teams, on average, normally beat Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Sauber teams. So you're losing out on points for using McLaren, Sauber. And there will come a time in the season, 100%, if you have over 120 million. So again, maybe if you have less than 120 million, you might just want to take the punt anyway, because maybe you can't get to these sorts of teams we're about to talk about. There's more than likely that you'll be able to get to Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Mercedes by the end of the season. On average, you get 27.7 points more from running Mercedes over the likes of Sauber throughout this season so far. So you're losing 27.7 points by not holding onto this chip, just conserving it until later down the line. Hey, who knows, even if you're that far ahead in budget, you might be able to use McLaren, Ferrari with those two. And that's 36.2 points ahead of Sauber on average. So just be careful, have a look at when you use extra DRS, because yes, it still will be a great option to use, but if you are like me and you think you can get to Norris, Piastri, McLaren, at least Mercedes teams, come to even Qatar, I would say wait for then and go for the extra DRS at that race. Now, finally, for the most important part of the video, it is the team selections. Now, of course, heading into this weekend, there is realistically only one big team I would use, because it's great on points and it's great on budget. And I'll give you my step-by-step guide for it as well. But the team consists of Piastri, Hulkenberg, Behrman, Alonso, Stroll, McLaren and Ferrari. Now, this team will cost you 119.8 million. So if you cannot afford this, then do this step by step down till you can afford a team very similar. So first of all, you'll want to go Stroll down to Gasly, which would cost 117.9, then Gasly down to Lawson for 115.8, Behrman down to Gasly for 114.9, and Gasly down to Colapinto for 112.8. Now, realistically, you really want to get one of these teams in because it's really beneficial to have Nico Hülkenberg in your team selection. However, if you have to drop down because you still don't have 112.8 million, then you'd go Hülkenberg to Behrman 111.9, and then Behrman to Gasly for 111. But realistically, you've got to have Hülkenberg in your team somewhere. He is such a great asset to hold right now. Then extra DRS team, like I've already mentioned before earlier in the video, it is definitely Piastri and Norris as the two to go towards. They are just so consistent. Even let's say if McLaren didn't do too well in qualifying, come Saturday, I still think that they would easily be able to get both onto the podium with their race pace that they normally have. And then to cover them, I would have Hülkenberg, Behrman and Stroll. And again, if you can't afford that team, then I go Stroll down to Gasly and then Gasly down to Lawson. And then finally on the team selections, this now is a complete out of the blue team selection for most people, but I know there are a select few that can bring in the Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari teams. And if you can do this, no matter how bad the budget looks for you, if you get locked into a team like this, you'll be sitting pretty for the rest of the season. So I would say, even with a -10, if you can go to Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Ferrari with the likes of Alonso, Lawson, Colapinto, that's realistically where you would be at. I would recommend using this team. And then finally, for anyone who can't afford to have Ferrari in their team, I would not go Mercedes as they need too much of a budget increase on the points wise to go up that 0.3 million, so they're a write-off for me there. So that means you would have to go down to McLaren and Sauber. So realistically, I would go to a team that consists of Piastri, Hülkenberg, Stroll, Alonso, Behrman, McLaren, Sauber at 98.2. It starts to get your budget up. Then you can start building those good teams with Piastri, McLaren, Ferrari, and then you'll see later down the line where it gets you. However, that is everything that you need to know for F1 Fantasy heading into the Belgium Grand Prix. I hope you could all take something out of this for your team selections, and just remember that I will be on Twitter for any questions that you have. I will be in the comments down below. I'll try to, at least, because I'm going to be at the track, so it might be a little bit difficult for me. We'll try to be in the Fan Amp comment section on the live stream. Who knows, if the internet is good enough, maybe I could sneak in as well, but I would be very surprised if I was able to do this. But anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Enjoy your day and enjoy the rest of the racing this weekend. Take care, everyone.